Thursday Night Football is on, and it's only on Prime. This Thursday, it's a matchup between two of the NFC's most exciting teams when the Seattle Seahawks take on the Dallas Cowboys. Not a Prime member? Sign up for a 30-day free trial to stream the game live from Dallas. It's the Seahawks and the Cowboys on Thursday Night Football, and it's on Prime. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details.
Hey, this is Peter Schrager from the podcast The Season with Peter Schrager, and it is football season, and you can now get almost anything you need for game day delivered with Uber Eats. What do they mean by almost? Can Uber Eats deliver you foam fingers? No. Chicken fingers? Yes. Touchdown dances? No. Buttermilk ranches? Yes. Field goals? No. Grilling coals? Yes. And there you have it. Get almost anything for game day delivered with Uber Eats, the official on-demand food delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Product availability may vary by region. See the app for details.
Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast with Borg, Betz, and a Baller.
Welcome in. It's Wednesday, November 29th here. Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast, episode 37. I'm here with Jason Moore and Matthew Betz.
37 episodes. Wow, Kyle. That's kind of seems like a lot, doesn't it? Like we actually stuck around for more than half a year.
Well, look, when we originally came up with the concept, and we were in the planning stages, the Kyle whiteboard stages, as he brought us out, there was a timeline on this whiteboard, and we had it all mapped out for an off-season Dynasty show. But then the show was just too good. And the people demanded it to be year-round, so we said, okay, we'll just keep doing it once a week, every week, forever.
37 episodes into this podcast. And I think that one of the things that we'll bring up on this show might be my most spirited Dynasty debate I've had in a while. And I think it's good. It was good for the show. It's good for the league. Jason's part of this. 37 episodes in. Betz, I started doing some math. You and I think we've recorded 350 episodes together. And Jason's, he's already in the 15,000 hours club, as Mike mentioned. Like he's been doing a lot of podcasting. So
it's why my voice gives out so much, because after 15,000 hours of talking, I'm surprised I can keep going.
It's just gravel.
Well, not all heroes wear capes, Jason.
I do wear a cape, though. I'm wearing one right now.
Jason has given his body to this company for years and years and years and just laid it on the line.
10 years ago when we started this, I was not nearly this unhealthy. And so now that I've given my body to fantasy football, I'm just a fat turd. That's all. That's what I've become.
This is what fantasy football gave you in return?
Yeah, in return, they've given me a lot of championships and a lot of eating my feelings.
Yeah, no, I'm there. I was pretty sad this weekend on a number of fronts, but if you're with us, we're glad. It's week 13. We're going to be talking dynasty differences, some players at the beginning of the year. This is where we had them ranked. This is where the consensus was. I'm even going through some, dynasty values of, hey, this is this position of the last 5 years. And we're going to talk about where they're at right now, because a lot of these players are very, very different. So we'll compare some different players. We'll talk about some mistakes we've made this year. But if you want to get in all the fun, you go to jointhefoot.com. You can be a part of our Discord channels. One of my favorite channels to pop in is to see the commissioner chat, where commissioners get to talk through a ton of stuff. I got a question today. I thought it was quite pertinent. Someone said on Twitter, they said, hey, could you guys talk about tanking rules for Dynasty on the show?
What?
How much time do we have?
Oh, man.
They said, in most leagues, do they allow tanking? Is it in the rules to allow tanking? So, Jason, you can, just
you want me to take this away? All right. Well, we're going to have a show here today, it seems.
I I love you,
Well,
Jason.
yeah, I love you too, Tanker. But in our main Dynasty league, there was a little bit of drama this last week with Kyle co-manages a team with Al Borland with Jeremy. And Kyle and Jeremy, for the first time ever in the history of this league, like we've been, this is not a brand new league. This is a Dynasty league that's been around a long time. The first week ever, you saw outright unmitigated tanking where Puka was on the bench.
A great sit, by the way. A great sit.
Right, yes. Who else did you say? I mean,
Tank Dell was our big one.
Yeah, Tank Dell, Puka. I mean, and you started like Hardy, who didn't play.
Surprise inactive.
Okay, a surprise inactive, but also let's say he had played. You started Hardy over Puka and Tank Dell.
Kyle's trying to defend that situation.
So look, the only way Kyle can defend it, the only way Kyle and Jeremy can defend it, the way that they have defended it is saying that tanking isn't wrong. Like, that's the defense. And to be fair, that is a defense you could have to say, look, in a Dynasty league, I'm doing what's best for my team. I am trying to play for the future, get a better pick, blah, 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 blah. And some leagues have written rules against it. Some leagues don't. And in the leagues that don't have written rules, they have unwritten rules. There is integrity and goodness, and I think that there's always those questionable ones, right, where it's like, you could make an argument that, this guy's coming back off an injury, and even though most people would play him, I think I'm going to play the slightly less good guy. And so you can make those kind of moderate decisions that maybe your heart doesn't really believe when you're making start-sit decisions. But the truth is, in Dynasty leagues, you should not have tanking. Every league out there, every major real league has active rules against tanking, and that doesn't mean that teams still don't tank, still don't look to lose, still don't trade away players, still don't, let injured players get a little bit healthier in real life. But there are active rules against it because for the integrity of the league, for matchups that affect other teams in the league, that affect playoff pictures and things like that, you want to have confidence. And so now going forward, starting next year, we have written rules against it. Thank you, Kyle. But that is my opinion. My opinion in Dynasty leagues is you cannot outright tank. You have to start what is moderately your best lineup. Questionable start-sit decisions, defensible start-sit decisions you can make, but you can't be benching stars for scrubs just to get a better pick.
Betz, I'll let you follow up, and then I'll give kind of my, because I listen, at the end of the day, I agree with Jason. Written rules are key to be able to define what is often undefined or unwritten. So, Betz, I'll let you go. Does this happen in any of your leagues?
I mean, I think you definitely have to have the written rules aspect of it, because if you don't, there's going to be some squirrely guys in your league like Kyle and Jeremy who pull a fast one on you, and then it just creates this cascade of people getting upset with each other, and you shouldn't have done that, but then someone tries to justify it, and so it kind of goes back and forth. So you have to have, I think, like a written rule, whatever it is for your league, just like, this is what it is, this is what you have to follow. But that has happened in my leagues as well. I will say, totally honest, if I'm the team playing on the other side of it and I need to get into the playoffs, okay, that helped.
And what if?
But I've been part of it, and where I missed the playoffs because some team won that should not have won in that scenario, and so it'll get you, it'll bite you in the butt.
I'm
for
happy
sure,
to report,
but you got to have written rules.
Happy to report that the Tank-opotamus job did not affect the outcome of the game. They stunk anyways. I mean, there's a little bit of. You probably lost about 20 points on the deal for your point tiebreakers, but it's just Bush.
Wait, Kyle, so I know that this has been going on for a while. You've been trying to rebuild, trying to get picks, younger players. Why? Like, you're probably in a position to be a bottom 3 or 4 team as is. Why did you choose this week to outright blatantly tank?
Because there are 2 teams at the bottom, it's us and another, that are fighting for this number 1 pick. And last year, it just so happens that these same exact 2 teams were in this situation. And Jeremy, being the integrous man that he is, decided to start a full roster. It cost him Bijan, so Jason can thank getting Bijan because of Jeremy. Mm-hmm. So Jason's come out on the good side of this. Circle.
Yeah, I had the pick of another team that was battling for that worst spot, and I needed Jeremy's team to win, and they did at the end of last season. So I was able to have the 101, got Bijan, and now regrets have come in place. But I will say this, for everybody playing in Dynasty leagues, for people listening to this Dynasty podcast, for managers and league mates that have had these issues, we have instituted a new rule for next year that I think will fix it all. And it's not just, I agree. It's not just a written, like, you can't tank rule. What it is basically the teams that are outside of the playoffs, when you come to seed for draft picks next year, we are not doing it based upon record. So the worst record, the best record of those teams out of the playoffs, we're doing it on max points for. So max points for are going to look at if you started your optimal lineup every single week of that year, how good is your team? Like your players on your roster, how many points would you have scored? And it's going to do that for every team in the league. And then the worst team, based on how many points they could have scored that year, gets the number 1 pick. The second worst gets the number 2 pick, et cetera, et cetera. But that means that now teams aren't incentivized to score fewer points, to lose games. Go ahead and play your best every single week. And if you don't make the playoffs, we're going to award the draft picks to the correct teams in the correct order. So if you want to tank, like if that's your goal to get that number 1 pick, now what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to, if you really want to do it, you're going to have to trade away players that are scoring points so that you have less max points. But then there's obviously a cost to that because if you want to rebuild, you kind of need players that are going to score points as well.
Yes, and this is a 1-year thing that voted on, tried out for this next year. And I think my bigger point for this podcast, and I think Jason would agree with this, is just whatever league you're in, now is the time to have these conversations. A lot of times they get punted to next year. They get punted to August, September. Start these conversations now if you want to set a league vote. But we'll be talking all offseason about Dynasty League management. You know, we'll have some shows where we talk about what do you do as a commissioner beyond just tanking, but just what's the proper setup. And so I think that's more of the thing is there are people that want to talk about this and they're in our Discord, our commissioner chat. So you can go to jointhefoot.com if you want to be part of the largest Discord for fantasy football on the planet. But I have one more quick question for us, and it's your biggest Dynasty mistake so far this year. So looking at your own teams, boys, what would you say you're looking back at regret that you would say, I can't believe I didn't do this. So Jason, you can start us off.
Yeah, let me go first and just keep piling up on Kyle. Because a couple weeks ago we had a show of like a trade for targets, and I brought up David Montgomery as a great trade for target. I even talked about how I was close to making a deal with someone in one of our main leagues for David Montgomery. But that player decided that they weren't going to do that deal with me because they won the game, and so they were going to look a little bit harder. And so then a week goes on after we record that show, and Kyle, the Borgignoni, the monster, you're starting to get a bad rep here, Borg, goes and trades for David Montgomery in that league from that other manager. So my biggest regret was that I just didn't pay up enough for David Montgomery because we were kind of haggling over some little stuff earlier, and I could have just paid, got him, and then Kyle couldn't have usurped me here. And honestly, you know, I think that's a big difference. We're two competing teams for the title, and this is a valuable fantasy asset that did not add to my team and did add to your team.
Yes, on that show, I talked up Jerome Ford, who was my target, because I thought he'd be cheaper, obviously, than David Montgomery. And I went hard after Jerome Ford, didn't get it, and then I pivoted to David Montgomery and was able to get the deal done. It was a first and something else for David Montgomery, but it was like, okay, I hate giving up a future first, but I need this for the stretch run. And yeah, it looks a lot better in my roster than yours. So, Betz, what about you?
Yeah, those trades always come back to get you when you're like, I should have just given that extra second or, you know, whatever it is to get it done. Those are the worst. Just in general, not just like in the, you know, throughout the course of the season, but in the rookie process, was too low on Sam Laporta. And really just the rookie hit rate, we talked about it a bunch on this show for tight ends, is not good. But there was kind of just an immediate opportunity that there was no other tight end on this roster. They spent very high draft capital on him early in the second round. And even with those things in mind of like, hey, this is probably going to be a pretty good offense, I still was like, you know what? I'll let someone else, fall on the grenade. I'm not going to take the rookie tight end. And in the leagues that I play in, I only have one share of Laporta, and he's looked awesome this year for what he's done as a rookie. So very excited about him moving forward. Just don't have enough of him.
Yeah, I think your main issue there is that you forgot he was an Iowa Hawkeye, and that is tight end U. I mean, that is.
Do we have another one coming out this year?
I should look into that. I don't follow the future draft class well enough at this time of year. Come January, I'll know. But I mean, that's George Kittle, right? That's T.J. Hawkinson. That's
Dallas Clark, Noah Fant.
Yeah, I mean, these guys are how Iowa is so good at finding, recruiting, developing tight ends. I mean, if I'm an NFL GM, I'm going to that guy who's responsible for getting those tight ends and saying, "You want a job? Come work for my franchise."
Laporta, I need to look back at our rookie picks and some of our data, but I like mid-second round rookie pick. Is that kind of where he was going?
Yeah, I think that was right. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm assuming in most drafts he went ahead of Michael Mayer?
I don't think so.
I think so. There's probably some people, though, that had Mayer ahead, so it was probably a league-dependent
No,
thing.
I think on average, Michael Mayer went ahead of Laporta.
Yeah, they were like back-to-back in the real NFL draft. So my mistake this year was I was too low on Brandon Ayuk, and I wasn't set on Brock Purdy being the answer. And because of that, it was quite rough to be able to make a transition from jumping in with George Pickens and saying, I'm going to get a second-year leap, and saying, I don't know if Brandon Ayuk gets the fifth-year option at all. Of course, they picked it up. They're going to have him. He looks awesome this year. And it was one of the worst swaps that I had this year. It was just straight up Ayuk and Pickens.
Ooh.
And I look back now, because I made that trade. I mean, I can look back at the timeline. I probably made that trade in February. So it was a guess on a player who I thought could break out more.
The process,
maybe I was into Kenny Pickett.
The process makes sense. I mean, you had a rookie Pickens who flashed in the offseason. If you remember the preseason, I mean, this is probably after you made the trade, but the Steelers' offense looked like, oh man, they're going to be legit. They're going to be a real thing. And I don't necessarily blame the process, but obviously it's a mistake. It's a whoopsie doozle.
Yeah, and none of us make those kind of mistakes in Dynasty. Like, we're professionals. We do this for a living. We don't want to look back. But yeah, I'm telling you, that you look at a roster and you're like, oh my gosh, how did I end up with this player? But you also get a lot of players that you kind of luck into. The Tank Dells, Puka this year. It's like, sweet, this was free. It's great. But on this show, we're going to talk about some differences, players that have changed in value. So, George Pickens is one of those players that with Ayuk was pretty much seen in a similar tier. Like, I'm looking at our rankings now, is like 5 or 6 spots below Ayuk, and I guess wrong. But let's talk about some more players.
What's the difference between me and you?
All right, we're talking differences today. And Dynasty is one of those formats where it is ambiguous across the board when you're looking in the offseason, even this part of the year, of what this player is, how much they're valued. We had a conversation after week 1 on the show, and we said, what is Calvin Ridley? And after week 1, it was bananas. After week 5, I don't know if you even want this player on your team.
It was rotten bananas.
And now, I don't know. We're kind of in the middle. He's had 2 good weeks in a row. So things change a lot. We're emotional beings. We go back and forth with players. And we're going to talk about one player that's moved up in our Dynasty minds and rankings and value, and one player that's moved down. So, Jason, I will let you start us off first from a player that we've talked about a couple of times during the season, and he's a wide receiver 1 right now in fantasy.
Yeah, he is. He's the new hotness. We were talking, Andy and I were looking at our league of record, which is not a Dynasty team, but it is a keeper. So you only keep your best, the creme de la creme. You basically keep 3 players, and he's got a great team. And he was looking at how his keeper lottery is going to go, and he is putting into his keeper lottery in a redraft keeper league, Tank Dell. That is how much we believe in the future of Tank Dell, of the talent of Tank Dell, and he has skyrocketed from my pre-NFL draft vision of Tank Dell to what he could ever become in the NFL. This is a guy who I was very sizist against. I don't have a lot of belief in 165-pound wide receivers, and it is ironic because I was a pretty big supporter of Devontae Smith coming out. I knew that the talent and the skill set would supersede all the weight worries, but he was much heavier. And then this year, I banged the drum for Jordan Addison. Now, Jordan Addison's 175 pounds. That's the lightest guy I've ever banged the drum for, but I thought he's talented enough. And in this new modern NFL, we're seeing these quick, shifty guys who can get in and out, work the slot, and just run great routes and be protected by new defensive rules. They've been great. So I banged the drum for Jordan Addison, but 165 pounds was a bridge too far for me. And I just did not believe this. I thought this would be more like Tutu Atwell, who was a great college player. But when you are sub 170, you just can't exist. You can't work in the NFL. It doesn't. Your body's not going to hold up for one, and you're not going to be able to get off the line. It just doesn't work. Eventually, you're playing with these monsters of men, and Tank Dell's proven me wrong. I mean, obviously, anybody who doubted him, you're a dummy dum-dum. You know, he was a little bit older than what I usually like as a prospect coming in. He's 24 years old right now. He did have the draft capital, so that's okay. Round 3, day 2 pick. But I just wrote him off. I mean, his production in college was elite, but I wrote him off. And when I watched him as a player, I definitely thought he was an excellent route runner. Just he ran them different than everybody. Just kind of a real special herky-jerky type of player that got open nonstop. But it was pretty much one thing. It was just he was 165 pounds. I'm going to bet against that. It's not going to work in the NFL. And so that's a lesson I think I need to learn as the years go on. And this was actually this past offseason before the NFL draft when we had things. I don't remember if it was our top 10 tips and tricks or if it was things to remember. But one of those 2 episodes, Mike brought up that the NFL is changing when it comes to weight of wide receivers. It used to be you basically had to be over 200 pounds. But it has come down like 5 pounds every year over the last 5 years, where it's just like these teams are open to small, shifty, great route running, good hands guys. The Tank Dell has dominated. He's now attached to C.J. Stroud. And if you look at where he was in rookie drafts, he was the wide receiver 10 on average. That was behind a lot of players that you obviously, he's behind Jaden Reed, behind Josh Downs, behind Jonathan Mingo, behind Marvin Mims, behind Rashee Rice, behind Quentin Johnston. And now it's like there's not even a debate. There's not a debate to be had. You take Tank Dell over all of those players. So that is the player who's risen the most for me in Dynasty.
One of the points that I think is worth echoing here, Jason, is when you're evaluating players before we know anything, they haven't taken an NFL snap, is you're making a bet. It's a probability bet. And based on what we've seen historically, players this small, players this light, players with a rookie quarterback, like that's usually something that works out over time. Like if Jason, you're making that bet, 20 times, you're feeling really confident most of the time. Like, hey, this is probably not going to work.
If I made that bet 20 times before this time, I would have gone 20-0. Unfortunately,
I love those odds.
Yeah, maybe he's an outlier and I shouldn't change my process. That is worth considering. There are humans that are just different. But I think I don't think he's a complete outlier because like I said, with what we saw with Devontae Smith, Jordan Addison, Tank Dell, even Zay Flowers, Josh Downs, these are small guys that the NFL's changing. And I think it is more of a prescription, more of something we need to learn and fix our mistakes on than an outlier.
Do you feel like, Betz, that looking at what he's done with the rookie quarterback, which, by the way, C.J. Stroud is currently supporting 2 top 15 options. We've never had that from a rookie quarterback, ever. And so that's wild. His yards per route run, his targets per route run, they're in an elite category. So beyond just where he stands with rookies, because we've done the rookie draft redo where we're like, okay, he's right there with JSN and Addison in our minds. You could take him there. But for next year, Betz, is he creeping into top 15 dynasty wide receiver territory? Like, that's where we had like Olave in redraft circles and then pushed up even further in dynasty. Is he a top 15 dynasty wide receiver?
Yeah, I think just hearing Jason talk about him, I even asked myself the question in my head while Jason was talking. I'm like thinking about, as soon as the Dynasty Pass comes out in the offseason, like, is he going to be ranked as a top 12 Dynasty wide receiver? Like, that's kind of what I was thinking in my head. And I was trying to go through names of who I would put in there. And like, for me, I think somewhere around 15-ish feels right. Like, almost certainly top 24, right? Like, no question about that. But then it's just how bullish are you and where do you prefer him to other guys? So, yeah, I mean, we love betting on rookies that produce, not just produce, but like produce elite levels as far as efficiency in year one. Historically, those are extremely strong bets to do better in year two and become superstars for fantasy. So one thing that I think we can also take away from this, just like a learning lesson, sometimes I think dynasty players are just a little too slow to react to what they see on the field. And it's like, if you saw a few flashes of this early in the year, you'd be like, yeah, but he's still only 165 pounds. Like, this can't be real. Well, CJ Stroud can't be this good. And if you kind of miss that boat, if you don't have him, like, you're not trading for him now, right? I've got him in a couple leagues where people are just sending me offers, and like every week I'm like, man, the price keeps going up. Like, right. I'm not trading away Tank Dell right now. Like, I view him as a very valuable asset. So I think being able to kind of shift your take on a player quickly is hard for a lot of dynasty players.
Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Thursday Night Football is on, and it's only on Prime. This Thursday, it's a matchup between two of the NFC's most electric teams when the Seattle Seahawks take on the Dallas Cowboys. Tune in early for pregame coverage with TNF Tonight, live from Dallas. It's the Seahawks and the Cowboys on Thursday Night Football, and it's on Prime. Not a Prime member? Not a problem. Simply sign up for a 30-day free trial and you can cancel at any time. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details.
Hey, this is Peter Schrager from the podcast The Season with Peter Schrager, and it is football season, and you can now get almost anything you need for game day delivered with Uber Eats. What do they mean by almost? Can Uber Eats deliver you foam fingers? No. Chicken fingers? Yes. Touchdown dances? No. Buttermilk ranches? Yes. Field goals? No. Grilling coals? Yes. Running backs? No. Ribs? Yes. Blitzes? No. Beers? Yes. Defense? No. Deodorant? Yes. Game-clinching turnovers? No. But pastry turnovers? The kind with the delicious apple filling? Yes. Because that's groceries. And you can get those delivered with Uber Eats too, along with food from your favorite restaurants and other essentials. And the best part, you can get it all without missing a second of the action on your TV. And there you have it. Get almost anything for game day delivered with Uber Eats, the official on-demand food delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. You can get alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See the app for details.
Betsy, hit me with a player that has changed in value this year in Dynasty.
Yeah, I want to just kind of piggyback right off of Jason's here, where he was talking about a rookie wide receiver that I can, similar to Tank Dell, just wasn't that excited about Rashee Rice. And this is kind of the same thing that Jason was talking about with not the size concerns, but just when you have this kind of idea of like the bets you want to make in Dynasty, and I'm not sure if that's right or wrong moving forward, but just kind of where I was at, it's like, man, this guy played at SMU. He was a 4-year player. Like, his production profile was okay, but not great. And it's like, you know what? Rashee Rice is like fine. Like, I don't, value him super highly in rookie drafts. I certainly was taking like Marvin Mims over him. There was a couple leagues where I took Jonathan Mingo over him, which felt like a mistake. But he has been awesome this year. And I know we've talked a lot about that 2.0 yards per route run is kind of like, it's not the end all be all, but when you look at historical data of rookies that hit that and what they do moving forward, the hit rate is insane. And Tank Dell is one of those guys. Rashee Rice is one of those guys. He is 11th in the NFL among all wide receivers, not rookies, in yards per route run. He is second in the NFL in yards after catch per reception and earning targets at a very high rate. And so I just feel like Rashee Rice, at this point is a guy that I'm pretty excited about moving forward. When you look at the state of the wide receiver room and Travis Kelce, is he even there next year? And if he is, he's another year older, and you could just really see Rashee Rice emerge for Pat Mahomes. So I'm pretty excited about him next year, just like Tank Dell.
Jason, you deserve some props because I'm looking at our rookie ranks, and I would have thought he would have been 8th, 9th. Like he was firmly our wide receiver 5 in our dynasty ranks, and I think a lot of that was you pushing him up. So I mean, it wasn't like one of those things where you're like, I know this guy's going to be a hit, but it was something that you were definitely banging the table for a lot during the offseason.
Yeah, I really like this film. I think his production profile would have been outstanding if they could have included the amount of pass interferences this guy drew. I mean, he was moving the ball down the field. It was just like players were having to hang all over him. And I think there was a little bit too much negativity over what we've seen from Sky Moore and Mecole Hardman, saying like, well, look, these rookies come in, they're not going to get it done with Patrick Mahomes. Just because they haven't gotten it done doesn't mean that they won't. You've got to still grade everyone individually. This is part of the C.J. Stroud problem, right? CJ Stroud being a quarterback from a school that doesn't ever have quarterback hits. They're always drafted.
Perfect point.
And so a lot of people really, truly just wrote off CJ Stroud because he was from Ohio State. He had great wide receivers, and it couldn't have been him. It was the fact that he was throwing to, Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and these type of Marvin Harrisons and all the guys drafted from Ohio State. They flame out, and it's like, well, okay, but just because it has happened doesn't mean that it's always going to happen.
The hardest part about the Chiefs is the way that we have to filter their offense has always been, okay, there's Kelsey, and then there's the Tyreek years, and there's no one else that you can really, there's Sammy Watkins that pops up for a second, and you can't really fit that in. But what if this is just a different offense? What if this is an offense that does have room for a player like that? So moving forward, I'm curious to see where his value ascends in the offseason, because there will be talk like, look at what this guy did, and his role's only grown. We saw it this past week where it was like, okay, you look like the clear wide receiver one on this team with Tony out, Hardman on IR. So it'll be interesting in the offseason. Like he might be one of those names that gets steamed up as a second-year ascension player. And, would you rather have Rashee Rice or George Pickens on your dynasty roster?
I think we all know the answer to that.
I think I do too.
I would take Rashee Rice.
Yeah. Jason, do you got something you need to share?
Well, it's a little, this podcast will come out tomorrow, so this won't be as breaking news, but I'm just getting the alert right now that Jonathan Taylor is undergoing thumb surgery, could return in 2 to 3 weeks. So that is like, woo, that's pretty big news for circles around, leading up to the playoffs.
Wow.
Well, Zach Moss is going to be the most popular player in DFS this week. I can tell you that right now. 4,600. Okay, I'm going to throw out a player that is near and dear to the hearts of this podcast, to many of us, to shirts we wear all the time.
We built this city.
Michael Pittman Jr. has solidified himself as somebody who's going to get paid this offseason. We knew he was because he was entering a contract year. Do you think that Michael Pittman, among wide receivers that are going to get, the T. Higgins of the world, like, is he going to get the biggest contract out of all of them? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, he will get a big contract, but he's going to stay with the Colts. I don't think he's going to go look for the absolute biggest payday. Like, it would take some team offering him, but, something insane, I think, for him to leave the Colts. He's got a good thing going on there. The team likes him. He likes the team. So I do think he gets a big bag, but I don't think he resets the wide receiver market. He's not going to get a Tyreek Hill type of offer from anyone or from the Colts, but he'll get a big bag of money and stay with the Colts. That's my belief.
I think he'll get the type of contract that Mike Williams, Chris Godwin did. It was like a 3-4 year deal where their average salary was well over $20 million per year.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really want to go down a fun rabbit hole, go on Spotrac, which is a website we use a ton to, to look at salaries. But before the year, you can find what they estimated his salary would be in free agency, and then how it's increased.
Should have signed him early, huh? What was it? Do you know?
Before the season, the average salary is going to be about $18 million. They projected $73 million over 4 years. Now they're looking at an average salary of over 20, almost 23.5, which feels a little high, but still, like, that's like top 10 wide receiver money in terms of per year. And you might say, like, Michael Pittman, why is he worth that? To the Colts and them re-signing them, he's an important part of this team. Before the season, though, this is where he was ranked. In Dynasty, he was seen as a top 24 receiver when you factor in his age and what he had just done. 99 receptions. You remember that? Like, cool, 99 receptions for basically the worst PPR season ever for somebody with that many receptions. It was kind of disappointing last year because he had been hyped up. This year, 30% target share, 10 targets a game, 71 receiving yards per game, and he's still only 26 years old. So I think Michael Pittman has done a ton to solidify himself above a lot of names that were ahead of him. Chris Godwin, Hollywood Brown, Christian Watson. These were names that were right around him that I think we'd want Michael Pittman in Dynasty over all of those guys. Maybe not Watson, but I would rather have Pittman.
I would take Pittman over Watson.
Okay. So let me throw out this question to you guys. This is a value question. Where does he rank in Dynasty, in your eyes, among wide receivers compared to T. Higgins? Let's throw out that name first.
T. Higgins is a great counterpoint because these are very similar players to me. They came out in the same year. They will both be free agents this offseason. One, Michael Pittman is about to re-sign with his team. One, T. Higgins, I'm sure, is going to go get a bag of money from a different team.
And they went back-to-back in that draft.
And I'm going to take the guy that stays in the situation that I know works. We've seen too many times where a wide receiver changes teams and it doesn't work, especially when they're not a superstar, like a Tyreek, a Devontae Adams, but when they're just a really good player, we see it go poorly. Kenny Golladay type of free agent move. So I'll take him over T. Higgins.
Yeah, I like that call as well. The other thing, too, with Pittman is just, not just dependability from like a box score standpoint, but T. Higgins has missed a decent amount of time over the last couple of years, too. And like at some point, that has a ton of value in fantasy. And anyone can get hurt any week, obviously. But, Pittman has been there. He's been the dude. He's been, just piling up receptions over and over and over again. And what's nice about him is when he entered the league, remember, a lot of people kind of talked about him as like this downfield contested catch receiver is kind of what he did very well coming out of USC. He has transformed into being a pretty good route runner, especially over the middle of the field, getting not just those deeper looks, but also those high percentage routes too. So he really kind of has morphed into a very, very good all-around wide receiver.
I'll throw out another name to compare. Would you rather have Michael Pittman or Drake London, who are very similar players from the same exact college, big body guys? Who would you rather have in Dynasty?
That's an easy one for me, and I think that maybe there's value to be found here. I would take Michael Pittman over Drake London. I will take the guy who has been getting it done, who has been relevant for fantasy, who is the clear alpha on the team as far as not just talent, because I think that could also be said about Drake London, but as far as like target share and total passing volume, I would prefer to take the known commodity in Pittman versus the slightly younger, hopeful upside of Drake London.
What's wild about that too is you could probably flip, if you wanted to do that deal and you had Drake London, you could get Pittman and something I think pretty valuable.
Yeah, you
to get that deal done.
That's why I'm saying there's value to be had here. I mean, if you offered Drake London for Pittman and a 2, you'd probably get that deal from most managers.
The only thing I need to throw in about Pittman is we're getting a lot of this production without Anthony Richardson, who we know will be the quarterback next year. So there is some level of risk, but he's such a good player, and we've seen him earn targets from everybody under the sun: Gardner Minshew, Anthony Richardson, Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, Phillip Rivers. Like, he's been through it all, guys, and Pity City's still chugging. So definitely one of my favorite players in the league. Let's go with Jason, who's going to tell us a player who is just, I don't know where you even rank this player anymore.
Yeah, I mean, this is when you talk about guys that go up, that's great. There are guys that go down, and for me, this was a player that I was decently bullish on, and it's Miles Sanders. This offseason, there were 2 running backs who had very similar deals offered to them. There was David Montgomery and Miles Sanders. They were the winners of free agency because they weren't the crazy, super expensive free agent superstars like a Saquon who, ended up getting franchised because nobody's going to pay superstar money to. But they got a big deal for a running back, both of those players. And I liked both players coming into this season because for a running back, half the battle is, do they have a job? Like, do they have a contract going forward? Like, for instance, when Jonathan Taylor signed his deal, to me, his dynasty value skyrocketed. Like, he didn't change age. He didn't change teams. It was just, I know he's got like 3 more years. And that's how I felt about Sanders, and that's how I felt about David Montgomery. Obviously, it's worked with David Montgomery, but with Miles Sanders, hoofta. I mean, first of all, the season's been marred with injuries. He missed all of camp with this groin injury. He re-aggravated it this year, spent a lot of time firmly behind Hubbard I believe because of the injury. Now, the last couple weeks, he's back, baby. He's getting 15 carries a week. And you would have no idea if you didn't look and see he's getting 15 carries a week, because you'd be like, wait, didn't he only have 2 fantasy points? Yep. I think he might suck. I think he is hurt. He's obviously on a team that is imploding. They are right now the NFL's disaster, with Frank Reich getting fired 11 games into his tenure and Tepper kind of manhandling that franchise to its detriment. So going forward, it's like, how could you believe in Miles Sanders? How could you think it's going to get better for him? I mean, he'll be the running back next year because of the contract, but he just seemed like what do you do with him? If you have him in a dynasty league, you can't trade him for anything. So you just wait, and he just takes up a roster spot. You're not going to start him. So he's become almost irrelevant, but that's a player that, to me, I look at running backs in 3-year windows. I don't think you should ever look at a running back as longer than that. And when he signed that deal, his 3-year window reset as a relevant fantasy option, not a superstar, but relevant. And he is irrelevant. He has no place in active starting lineups. I mean, gross. I that's just complete whiff on my part.
Yeah, you can't trade him. Like, even if someone offered you a third, it's like, I'm just going to hold the running back who's going to hold value. So that doesn't really matter. It stinks because this team came in and their win total was 7.5. So it's not like Vegas thought this team was just going to be the worst team in the league. Now, Betz and I did hammer their under as, say, like, our favorite bet of the entire year. It just cashed today, by the way, people. Panthers under. But
sweat free.
I know. It was pretty nice. A 26-year-old running back at this point in his career that's just going to see a couple of touches here and there. I mean, their win total is probably going to be 4.5 in this next year. 4.5, 5, whatever it is. So bad teams, every once in a while, we look at players like Rachaad White. They get tons of work. Their team's not that great. They're good for fantasy. This is the other side of it. You can get tons of work, and it's not good. You get tons of work, get injured, and you're not helpful at all. So I'm worried, though, because we looked at the contract he got last year. And I'm bringing that up because we have some names in 2024 at the running back position that are probably going to get some contracts, and all of these names are big names. So let me list them for 2024. Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, Derrick Henry, Austin Ekeler, who we'll talk about in a second, and DeAndre Swift. These are the big names for fantasy that are going to get a contract. So any of those guys worry you because...
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, I have one that I'll talk about. So, yes. Is it the same, Jason?
I don't even know who you're going to talk about, but I doubt it. I think...
Love that.
Oh, it is. I'm looking at the doc. Yes, it is that. It is that guy that I am supremely worried about. So, I'll just let you have the floor in a minute. But everyone, I'm not that worried about Saquon. He's young enough. He's going to get a bag of money from some team. You worry about the age, the efficiency, the fall off. I think Josh Jacobs with this Raiders team, he's become like the heart of this team again. I think they sign him to a 2 or 3 year deal, keep him a Raider, so I'm not too worried there. Derrick Henry, I have no idea what to do with it. His age, what team's going to sign him, for how much money, for how much time. But the big worry for me is Betts' guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about him in a sec. But real quick on Sanders too. What I would do if you have him, you can't do anything right now. You just hold him. But there will come a time at some point, I feel like next spring, summer, where it's like Miles Sanders is running as the Panthers RB1 or just some headline, right? Because he has the financial commitment from the team. And you file this away. And when you see those headlines and you see just a little bit of like maybe Miles Sanders could rebound this year, you trade him away. That is what I'm doing. He is 46th among 48 running backs who have logged 60-plus rush attempts in NFL next-gen stats, rushing yards over expected. Worse than A.J. Dillon, worse than Rachaad White, worse than everyone, basically. It's just going from the Eagles' offensive line to a rookie quarterback in the Panthers was, a huge downgrade, obviously. But file it away, trade him next summer.
You just listed the two players last week that we deemed as butt runners, Rachaad White and A.J. Dillon. You're telling me that he's been worse than them this year?
Per this metric, yes.
Nice. All right, let's take a break. We'll be right back.
Thursday Night Football is on, and it's only on Prime. This Thursday, it's a matchup between two of the NFC's most exciting teams when the Seattle Seahawks take on the Dallas Cowboys. Not a Prime member? Sign up for a 30-day free trial to stream the game live from Dallas. It's the Seahawks and the Cowboys on Thursday Night Football, and it's on Prime. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details.
It's football season, and now you can get almost anything you need for game day delivered with Uber Eats. What do they mean by almost? Can Uber Eats deliver foam fingers? No. But chicken fingers? Yes. Touchdown dances? No. Buttermilk ranches? Yes. Field goals? No. Grilling coals? Yes. Running backs? No. Ribs? Yes. Blitzes? No. Beers? Yes. Defense? No. Deodorant? Yes. Game-clinching turnovers? No. But pastry turnovers, the kind with delicious apple filling? Oh, yeah. Because that's groceries. And get those delivered with Uber Eats, too, along with food from your favorite restaurants and other essentials. And the best part? You can get it all without missing a second of the action on your TV. There you have it. Get almost anything for game day delivered with Uber Eats, official on-demand food delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details.
We're back, and Betz, you are going to hit us with it's sad. Like, it's a sad story for fantasy.
Yeah, and it really is just one of those situations where you think about what happened the last 2 or 3 years when he was just, in redraft leagues, a no-brainer round 1 pick, a just top 3 running back every single year. Austin Ekeler now in Dynasty is borderline about to be maybe irrelevant, and that seems like so egregious
to say. It feels crazy to say that halfway through last year, Dalvin Cook is about to be borderline Dynasty irrelevant.
Right.
Dalvin Cook is irrelevant. He was great last year. Poof, vanished. He's done. So continue. I mean, that's
what I'm saying, man. He turns 29 years old in May and does not have a contract. And that is arguably the biggest red flag that exists. But beyond that, you just look at when you see running backs, especially guys that are older, start to slowly just show signs of decline as far as the efficiency. And then you combine that with the contract concerns and age, it really gives you just an uneasy feeling. This running back, Austin Ekeler, is averaging 5.1 yards per touch, 1.41 yards per route run. On the surface, those numbers sound okay, but when you look at his career, they're declining every single year. And you combine that with just the eye test, he just doesn't look right. I know there was a play 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago against Green Bay where he had that run on the left side, should have ripped it for a 50-yard touchdown or whatever it was, barely, makes anything useful out of it. So just 29 years old, injuries this year, no contracts, all the efficiency stuff on top of that. If you're a contender, obviously you're just holding him right now and you're hoping it rebounds. But I think the writing is on the wall that you have a player that will probably not have much of any value in 4 months.
A lot of times, fantasy and real life football just overlap. You're like, okay, this guy's awesome for fantasy. And clearly, he had a couple of those seasons where he was historic in the red zone, just like unbelievable. But everybody I feel like, is telling the same story right now with Austin Ekeler. And it's simply this, like, he just doesn't look very good. Like that, my eyes are telling me when I'm watching this game. And last week against the Packers, the announcers were saying the same thing. Like, I don't feel like he's juking off the right foot. Like, he looks not explosive. It just looks like he's like falling over. And then the fumble this past week was egregious. Now, Keenan fumbled too, and he gets a pass for that because he's Keenan Allen. But Ekeler, when he fumbled, like, he stood up, and this is the comment I made in our Slack. I was like, I feel like he stood up looking around for like someone else to say, like, who caused that fumble? Who was that? And it's like, dude, that was you, man. So eye test wise, he just looked done.
It happens so quickly to running backs. Right? Like last year, Austin Ekeler was the man. Dalvin Cook was the man. Like, it just happens.
Yeah, there's a ton of them, and that's the problem with running backs. They're not, when they get to a certain age, they're not going to get another contract. Like, Austin Ekeler could hit the free agent market and find no takers to make him a highly paid player, and he could walk away. I don't know. It's up to him whether he wants to take a backup timeshare job at a veteran average salary. He might decide, I've got better things to do in the media world, in fantasy football space, which he's super involved in. You just don't know. My hope, because I've got Austin Ekeler in our league of record and a couple spots, where it matters long term. My hope is that he shows some juice the end of this year and signs another 1 or 2 year deal with the Chargers, because I feel like anything other than that is going to be the end of Austin Ekeler.
Okay, I got to bring this up because we're using these as case studies. All right, older running back, hits a certain age. We'd rather be a year too early. That's kind of been one of our big lessons. It's something you've done, Jason, before. I know Andy's done this a lot in his Dynasty. You'd rather be a year too early and get a haul than be left holding the bag. I've done that with Dalvin Cook, if you're an Ekeler manager. So I just need to ask the question, is this offseason the time to just say you got to trade Christian McCaffrey? Because he's 27 and a half years old, and we had no worries about Ekeler. And we had no worries about McCaffrey because I'm riding him in leagues, and it is the best thing ever. But there will be a day where we say this guy cannot play fantasy football. Would you rather get a haul this offseason? Because if you have him right now, go to the championship.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a matter of the haul. That is what it comes down to. And I think that he is on top of the world right now. He is so dominant. He's going to win people championships where you can get a large haul. And what is a large haul? It is a young, sprouting running back superstar that maybe hasn't come all the way, plus a first. And that's really, really hard to do. You can't get it in every league, but this is something that, I've done successfully several times. Andy's done successfully several times. I've talked about, it seems insane now to think about when I was able to trade Julio for CeeDee Lamb in a first right before the end of Julio's career. But Julio it would be like trading Tyreek Hill right now. It's like, well, he'll never stop. He's just automatic. So I don't know. I don't know if you can try to trade him for Brees in a first.
That's what I wrote down.
I mean, that's what I would go try to do. I would go offer that if I've got CMC, I would go offer it for Brees in a first, absolutely, so that you're not holding the bag. You get youth and all that. And maybe the manager says, no, are you kidding me? I would take Brees straight up over Christian McCaffrey anyways. And you say, oh, okay, I'll just keep Christian McCaffrey and keep all these points. Like, there's not a huge downside here.
Yeah, Betz, do you agree on that? Because that was the name. I'm looking at our rankings that we had before the season. It's like, who are the young running backs that people would trade that don't have great vibes? It's like, well, Brees Hall's kind of had a lost season. Maybe people just say, it's Aaron Rodgers next year. He'll be fine. But I think it's worth poking in the offseason.
Yeah, you could also argue, I'll bet if you want to get a deal done, because Brees, in the offseason, people might be like, well, he's going to get Aaron Rodgers. Everything's better for him.
That's definitely going to happen.
But like Ken Walker, if he flames out at the end of this season, and then you've got year 2 Charbonnet and all that, like, Ken Walker in a first, you might be able to get.
Yeah. There's just very few names when you go through the list of young running backs. It's like, okay, well, it's Bijan, Brees, Gibbs, and Achane. Like, those are the names.
Yeah, ETN, I think, would be in that young name running back, but
yeah. All right, I'm going to throw out one more name here, and I have been pretty silent about this player because I hate it. I'm sad as a fan, but it's Kyle Pitts. And we just need to just talk about what he is, what he could be moving forward, because before the season, he was ranked in Dynasty and startups as the tight end 2 everywhere. It was mostly Mark Andrews was 1. Some places still had Pitts 1, but it was Mark Andrews and Pitts as the top couple. You could put Hawkinson in there in that mix too. Those were the dudes. Kyle Pitts was a late 3rd, early 4th round pick in startups. And I almost felt obligated to say he's top 3 as a tight end. That's just kind of like where in dynasty circles. Now in redraft, you're like, maybe this is the year, but you didn't say he was going to be a top 3 option. But what if I told you, gentlemen, okay, before the season, that at this point, the Atlanta Falcons would rank number 1 in the NFL in tight end target share, number 1 in completion percentage to the tight ends, number 3 in tight end receiving yards, and number 3 in tight end fantasy points? What would you have done with that information?
Oh, I would have gone and grabbed Jonnu Smith so hard. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you would think that this would be his season, and he's still so young and talented. But you know what's really hurt Kyle Pitts a lot this year? It's not just his failure to score fantasy points, which for the 3rd year of his 3-year career, but it's the influx of these rookies. Now it's like the value that he held in Dynasty was he was the only young, up-and-coming, he's going to hit prospect. Like Trey McBride looked like he was a complete bust already. Now it's like, oh, well, you got Trey McBride and Sam Laporta and Dalton Kincaid, and you've got these rookies that are coming in this year that are competing, and you're like, yeah, they might be better than Pitts, straight up. And so the value in Pitts, I remember 2 years ago trying to trade Travis Kelce and a first rounder for Kyle Pitts. Tried like crazy, and I couldn't get the deal done. And instead, I just won 2 championships with Travis Kelce and had a first-round pick where I could draft Zay Flowers or whoever we got there. I don't remember.
That is so wild because I am a Kyle Pitts manager on Jeremy and I's rebuilding team, and people were throwing us anything at him. And I didn't blame them. Like a second-round pick and some backup wide receiver. And it was at that point, I was like, I get why they're offering this because this is what this guy is worth right now. But to us, we're kind of pot committed, and it's just not worth it to move on. But I mean, where are you seeing his value bets compared to these other guys? Like he mentioned Kincaid, Laporta. I'm assuming you'd rather have those guys than Pitts.
I would, yeah. And I think what you're seeing, especially with Kincaid, is like the emergence of, I mean, Diggs is another year older, obviously, entering this offseason. Like, you could see a scenario play out, and Gabe Davis, we kind of know what he is, and I think he's in a contract year. Like, there is an outside possibility, but still I don't even say outside, an okay possibility that Kincaid emerges as the one in the next year or two for Josh Allen. That is insanely valuable. And we don't know who's playing quarterback. We don't know if it's going to be another rookie. Like, there's so many concerns with Kyle Pitts. So, yeah, I would definitely take those guys over him. Where I was at just personally a couple of weeks ago, before Luke Musgrave went on IR, I had a team, and this is before the Mark Andrews injury. I had I was like Cole Kmet and Andrews and Musgrave just chilling on a taxi squad. And I was like, I'm going to see, like, maybe I can just get Kyle Pitts. I can embrace the risk because I have Mark Andrews. Let's just see what happens. So I sent the offer, and the guy was like, no, I want Musgrave and a first. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And they're like, what about a second? Luke Musgrave in a second. And I was like, I'm still queasy to even do that, which tells you kind of where I'm at with Kyle Pitts. So that could, look silly in hindsight, but he's just hard to have confidence right now.
Yeah. Let me give you some numbers of where Pitts is at right now. He's a tight end 17. He has 2 weeks, people, inside the top 15 so far. He's on pace for 57 receptions, 682 yards, 93 targets. He hasn't seen a red zone target since week 6. So that's really bad. And then here's the behind the scenes numbers that I think tell the story of Kyle Pitts, because the Falcons are the Falcons. He's running in the slot a ton. He's not pass blocking, which is what we want, and he's getting downfield targets. Cool. Those are all the things we want. The one thing that Kyle Pitts is not getting is the layup targets. 49% of his targets are just 9 yards and in, where you look at Hawkinson or Kelsey or look at Sam Laporta. 71% of his targets are these kind of layup, PPR type receptions. And if Kyle Pitts doesn't hit a big one,
they call those Jonnu receptions.
Apparently, he gets all the receptions that are close to line of scrimmage that matter for fantasy. It's so frustrating because I've done a lot of tight end studies over the years, and I feel like I've gotten a lot of fruit from finding Kittle and finding Andrews when they were rookies. And what that led me to was you want players that can make plays down the field. They're better than the Jack Doyle targets that you just fall down and that's all you get. But if you don't get any of those at all, like if you don't get 3 or 4 targets that are just the 5 yards dink and dunk, then you can't really pad those stats when those big plays don't happen. And that's what you're seeing with Kyle Pitts. So that's kind of behind the scenes stuff. But any last thoughts on Pitts, guys?
I still, the only last thoughts is, when you look at Luke Musgrave in a 2 versus Pitts, that's an honest debate. I would rather have Pitts there. I still think his talent and it's fair. His age still factors in, maybe incorrectly, but he's younger than Dalton Kincaid. Kyle Pitts is, which you don't think about because he's in his 3rd year and Dalton Kincaid is a rookie, but he is still a little bitty baby boy. He's going to play in this league for at least 7 more years, hopefully for more than one team. I can't wait till he becomes a free agent, and obviously that might not be valuable for you in Dynasty if you're waiting for 2.5 years before the breakout. But I could see the path for a massive breakout still ahead, a la Greg Olsen, who you knew was a super talented, supreme athlete, great tight end, but he wasn't good. Was it Chicago that drafted him? Yes. I think it was Chicago. And then once he goes and signs with Carolina, and they're like, yeah, we love your physical ability, your talent, your pass catching. We want to use you in that way. And all of a sudden he became a Hall of Famer. I still see that is a possibility for Kyle Pitts. I don't see that as like a possibility for Luke Musgrave.
Yep.
So that's where I see the difference.
And that's probably a good point too, to say like if you can take on like his value in Dynasty and his price in a trade, depending on your league, is probably worth taking the shot now, right? And sure, you might miss on it, and Kyle Pitts could just be frustrating for 5 more years. But like you said, if he can turn into that, and the price is Luke Musgrave in a second, it probably actually is worth doing it. I think
they'll have a different quarterback next year. For just a fan's standpoint, Justin Fields would be super fun. Just Chicago might be shipping him out of here. He's an Atlanta guy, so that'd be fun. But here's the point that I pulled from this for just a dynasty value lesson. I looked at all the first-round tight ends, and they've been not very good other than TJ Hawkinson for fantasy. But when I looked at their value of what they were in the rookie draft to their 2nd year, to their 3rd year, to their 4th year, none of them really paid off, except for Evan Ingram as a rookie was really, really good, if you remember. Uh-huh. And then Hawkinson has been great for the last couple of years. You can buy a dip on these young tight ends once you get about 3 or 4 years in, and you're seeing that with Pitts. And it's worth the gamble because we know that tight ends break out way later. So to take Jason's point, like it could be year 4, year 5, you can wait on that. And if it ends up being if someone gives you Kyle Pitts because they are frustrated for a 2 and Luke Musgrave, or a 2 and, I don't know, some other rookie wide receiver, I think that's worth it if you can wait on it in Dynasty. So keep that in mind. We'll give lots of lessons during the offseason. We'll get to look at the season, some data, everything else that goes with it. But those are our names for Dynasty differences. That's going to do it for this episode And next week, we'll have a special episode ready for you. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. If you want to take your Dynasty skills to the next level, check out thefantasyfootballers.com.
Studies show that 94% of female C-suite executives played sports. That's right, but today 7 out of 10 girls feel they don't belong in athletics. That's why Bridgestone is partnering with professional football teams across the country to support girls' flag football leagues and provide them with STEM education through nonprofit Play Like a Girl. I love this. When you pair organized sports with science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, young girls can excel on the field and in the classroom and in any career. Because learning to run, catch, and dodge matters, but learning to lead on the field so you can lead in any field, that's what really matters.